Well, hello YouTube. Back for part 4, I see. We got the motor all built up, ready to go, shorten the leads to where they were from the factory, and we're ready to rock and roll. Got nice clean connections now. So now we just need to get the mechanical install on this Sunbird. It looks like it fits, but it doesn't quite because we need to have room for this little retaining clip. So we're going to get a drill bit that's large enough and sufficient for this. Drill bit that's sufficient for this would be probably 1/4 inch. No, we need 3/8. Or we could countersink it, one or the other. If we countersink it, we can just open up a pocket, which actually might be the smarter move, so that we can not weaken the frame any more than we have to. Still get the positive outcome. That's kind of annoying. In case you guys have these boards on your wall, I've found many little tricks in my day. One of which is when you have CA that's plugged, you drill a hole in it. Okay, this is the trick of the day, guys. Trick of the day. Ooh, where did that go? There, it went right there. And this is, of course, for something that, you know, you use a lot. And you always seem to have them yank out. That's the way I do it. Don't have to do it my way, but it works for me well. So then, back to the point. Drill. We need to drill this hole. So we're going to search for wherever we laid the bit, which I thought was right here, and it is right here. So we got that in there. Okay, nice and clean. Hole. Okay, so we've opened it up. Now we're going to walk it. Okay. So now we have a certain amount of depth here that will allow that to not touch, but it's still touching. So, probably not going to be able to get away with that method. So we'll just get the drill, and we'll just open it up a little bit deeper. Pushing very, very light pressure here. Very light. High speed, light pressure. Until it blows all the way through, guys. That was not exactly what I had hoped for, but whatever. Good enough. It was an unknown thickness of wood. Tight. Just walking the bit. Got our hole that's not perfectly clean, but clean enough to get the job done. Okay, so now let's talk about holes, guys. We have a hole here to get our wires through, but doesn't work. So what we have to do is we have to disconnect these. That's why I did the heat shrink color for color. That'll give us a counterclockwise rotation. Let's see if they fit. If they don't fit, I have a trick for you. Okay? One at a time is the trick. One at a time. One at a time. One at a time, guys. That's the trick. If you do one at a time, the 3 heads together obviously won't go all at once, but if you do one at a time, it'll almost always fit. Okay. So there you have it. So now, the complicated part comes. Now we have to figure out how we're going to mount this. And we have a variety of different ways we can mount this, one of which is to use the screws that would have come with the ASW28. Only problem is I don't know if I have those. Okay, so going to pull it out now. Trick of the day works the same way. One at a time. Okay, and then one at a time, and then one at a time. Okay? The other thing you can do is you can just clean up the bit that your grandpa made this hole here. And clean that up a little bit. And that will help, but you just don't want to get it totally gone, because if you do, you're not going to have much strength on this nose, on the surface here. So, not real crazy about the way that poked through, guys. Sorry about that. I had intended to just dive that in a little bit. But sometimes these things happen. Okay. So we're just kind of cleaning the hole out, deburring it a little bit. Okay, so now the next thing is to get this mounted. I'm going to search and see if I can find the screws. I'll be right back to you guys. Alright guys, so we had a little minor mishap there for a second, and what I found, the screws that go into that motor assembly, which is really cool that I found those screws. The problem is I also dropped this motor on the ground, which typically you wouldn't think of a big issue just dropping it, you know, like onto the floor. There was a rug there and everything. It broke two of the magnets in the bell housing. And then I tried to take out the set screw, which is right here, and the set screw is not moving. So anyway, it turned into a fiasco, as usual. So it's reassembled and everything, but there's a certain amount of ambiguity as to whether or not this thing is going to spin off the little bit of CA I had to use to fix the broken magnets, because those magnets are now CA'd together, and I had to do all that while the motor was not really where it needs to be. So what a pain in the butt. And of course I'm just getting ready to modify this plane to receive this different motor, and I'm not really excited about modifying it to receive this motor in the event of, you know, a complete motor failure, because I'm not necessarily going to go out and buy this motor. So before I drill holes and everything, even though I do know where the holes need to be and everything, I'm going to go ahead and fire this up and give it some throttle and see what we can find, see how it works. Throttle cut's on right now. Crappy battery hooked up. Just going to let it initiate. And it does spin free, it just doesn't spin really as free as it should. And so I'm hoping to work down that CA. Whoops, throttle cuts off. So you see that? That noise? That's the CA hitting. My hope is to just wear it down a little bit. Problem is it's going to create a bunch of excessive heat. So I'm not sure how fast that's going to happen. I think it's still got a lot of power. But the other thing too is we're going to put a lot of unnecessary load on the electronic speed control, which can cause problems too. It's definitely working. It's just more a matter of, is it working enough? So anyway, you guys get the idea of my problem here, and I'm sure you can appreciate that that is a problem. So just looking in here, the magnets that broke were on this side of the bell housing. And so one other thought I had, you may have noticed I unplugged the power from the electronic speed control. Obviously you don't want to do this while it's on. You can get a blade in there and sort of scrape it. You just got to be careful you don't damage this other component that's on the bottom. So I'm just going to do a little bit more of that and see if I can plane down that area where it's got resistance. And I can tell that I didn't bend the shaft or anything. I just definitely broke those 2 points. Those 2 magnets, this one and that one, or this one and that one. And so on the outside, on the outrunner portion of it, I've got a little knob of CA that's hanging down. So turning this back on, throttle cut is off. Powering it up. It's definitely wearing it down. Just want to try to get that debris out of there. While we're in a controlled environment with no real load on it, I'm hoping that it'll just wear down slowly. And to be honest with you, it's probably fine, but I'm just a little bit more than nervous we're going to have a complete failure. complete failure doesn't bother me. I mean, we were dealing with a motor that was doing that anyway. But I'm just more worried about if we would take out the rest of it and then lose the plane. So I'm going to let this cool, unplug the battery, turn off the transmitter here. And I guess at this point now it's just throw caution to the wind and see if you can't make the thing work. So, getting back to where we left off, I've got these 3 screws. And in order to get the screws through the housing, I got to make sure they're long enough, which they are not long enough to make it through there. So that's the first step, is just verifying that they're not long enough, which in this case they're not long enough. And I just got to try to get that little son of a gun out of there. So that leaves us with option B, which is to try to use the original hardware, but we're going to have to be a little bit more creative than original. Original mounting was a little bit different because there was 3 holes and we had a nut on the inside, which is fine. The difference is on this application is that we can't go through the designated holes. We have to go on opposite sides to kind of sandwich in the motor. And if you sit here and look, we've got these little detents here that we could use to hold the motor. But then also we have this plate that we can use if we could hypothetically fit it on the inside. Well, in this case, as it were, the original design on the ASW28 was that this would go through the nose, and then of course it would mount utilizing that connection point. Okay? So you see how that goes? So that would actually be your mount. So we could also use something like that and get a little bit more sturdy bite on the frame, which I guess I'm leaning that direction. The trouble is, then where do you put your wire? Because there's no relief, and then that covers up our access hole to get the wires into the cabinet. So at this point, I'm torn totally, guys. Totally torn. And this motor mount is not anything too fancy, to be honest. So I could just take and chop out a little bit of the unnecessary parts of it. The other thing that's ironic about this is that it doesn't look like the holes line up very well. I also had this plate that was in my bag of goodies, and I think it might have also been from this motor system. So I'm just going to take a look at that real quick. You know what? That must have been, I take it back, guys, that must have been the way it worked, because it's even got the relief for the wires to go. So these must have gone together. It's been a while since I've taken it apart, to be honest. I apologize for telling you wrong information there. So you got to get those lined up, and then that holds the wire loom thing. Let's try this. Let's see how this looks. I'm just going to get one screw started. I'm going to grab a Phillips screwdriver. So basically, we'll get in there. And we'll get this thing started. And then we'll do... Yeah, it looks like at some point this adapted then to the other hole pattern, which, if you look there, that's your hole pattern. So this would actually sandwich on the nose of the plastic body of the ASW28. So let's see how this goes first. It definitely is the way it was designed to work. And bearing in mind, on the ASW28, this was actually on the inside of the aircraft, and so the motor was all inside, and of course the shaft still spins. So that worked out nice for that. So I guess if that's the way it was designed, it might not be a bad idea to try to do it this way. So I'm going to just get these 4 screwed in here. I guess I do have my Phillips bit here too. A little bit bigger head. So once we get this done, then I have these 4 outside holes that will be black too, which is kind of nice. It'll match the look of the plane. But it's a little extra weight, and it's not really super duper necessary. So I don't know. We'll wait and see how this looks. So tightening this on. Tightening this. Tightening this. Okay, great. So now we've got that. And of course that's going to go the same as it did before, where the wires get pushed through one at a time so that they fit. Get them started, then get them started. Alright, so I gotta answer a phone call. Alright guys, sorry about the interruption. We basically got this motor here, and it looks like this mount is actually going to work nicely. So the only complication that I'm not real thrilled about is the simple fact that I don't have a great way of getting the screws from the back to the front. So, and the thing is about this plastic housing is that this plastic housing can receive just like a regular wood screw. Well, in my case, we had a longer machine screw with a nut, and honestly, that means we can probably take and try to work a machine screw in there and see if it happens to be the same thread count. And I'm guessing it's not. But since it's plastic, a lot of times you can just run them through regardless of what they are, and then you can just put a nut on the inside. So I think that might work, and at this point I'm kind of willing to do whatever to get the thing on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and put some CA on these threads from the motor mount, because that's going to be obstructed. We're not going to be able to get to it. In a few steps, it's going to basically be inaccessible for the foreseeable future. So, stupid ESC's popped out. So I got my kicker and CA here. I'm just slipping this in here. Maybe while I'm doing this, I should just unplug this so it doesn't get draped over and damaged somehow. Okay, so this is what you can do if you want to try to keep an inaccessible screw from coming loose. I would not recommend Loctite, which sounds funny because Loctite's kind of designed to do that. But Loctite causes other problems, guys, like heating plastic. Okay, so just a little bit on the threads, on the back side of the threads. And you normally can't access the back side of the threads, but in this case, ironically, you can. It can make it hard to get these out, but that's the idea, is you want them to be hard to get out. You don't want the vibration of using the motor to take that and make it break free. Okay? So we're going to do all 4 screws, okay? That one was a little bit tricky to get to because it's down by the wires. Okay? And kicker prevents this from wanting to stick to everything around it. It's not just a speed thing. It also helps to prevent like wires and stuff from getting stuck up against your new connection point. So definitely try to use kicker if you can. Kicker is cheap and it lasts for a long time, so if you buy it in the spray, you know, the kind when you got a pump, that's the kind I use. Not that there's anything magical about that style, it's just a little bit cheaper than if you buy the aerosol cans that are charged. So now the other thing is, with this motor mount, we could actually set up to have it put a little bit down thrust, and hold on, let me just think this through. Down and to the, I'm up on my head, down and to the right. And what that does is that helps to counter some of the torque roll if you go to the right, and then down helps to counter some of the pulling force from pulling you up. I am really tempted to glue this thing on, but I'm not going to do that, just because I don't want to rush this and make it really sloppy. But that being said, these are this is a plastic mount. I could just drill holes, which would be fine. I just don't want them to be in the exact same spot where they were before necessarily, because we can do a wider stance now, which is going to give us better control of the mount. So I'm going to take my drill. We're going to modify this bracket a little bit. Actually, we're going to need to make sure that that's the right size. So you can pilot drill. In fact, that's what we're going to do. We're going to use a smaller drill bit, guys. Smaller than the size of the screw. Okay? or the same size. And then when we put this in, we can actually heat that up a little bit and thread the hole. So let's try that. And then if you don't have a chance to get a nut in there, it's not the end of the world. So approximately where I want to go with this is going to be, obviously we need to hit the wood and we want to be able to hit the plastic at the same time. Those two top holes are pretty close to where I want them to be. I wonder if I can get these screws to mesh up. Then I don't have to weaken this plastic frame at all anymore. Problem is, if they don't mesh up, that's meshed up good enough for me. So what that means is my next step is to drill the two top holes, and then I have one centrally located bottom hole. So I'm just going to center it. And then of course I can use the factory holes if I ever decide to use the factory holes for something, that's fine too. So I'm just going to take and bite this with the drill bit moving real slow. Start it so it's moving quick, and then just work my way through it. Okay, so now the second step is I'm going to take this screw, I'm going to put it onto the end of a screwdriver, and I'm going to take a magnet, not the ones that are holding the rest of our junk, and I'm going to actually trade the jobs. Put these on this weaker magnet here, and then this strong magnet's going to hold this, and you'll see why in a second. Okay? Then you're going to take your lighter or your torch, and you're going to heat up the tip of this. That magnet's just going to keep it from falling off, okay? You don't want it to be so dang hot, but you want it to be hot enough to work. Line it up with your hole, and then this is going to act like a tap. Okay, so it's going to tap in to the plastic real nicely. Then you can lose the magnet at some point during your cutting, and you'll want to kind of pull this into the angle you want it to penetrate your plastic, okay? And then just work that in, and then work it out. You're basically, see if it's hot, you're basically done. So now you should be able to use that hole without having to have a nut, which is pretty awesome. So let's see if we're going to line up with our bottom hole. Definitely not. I'd have to really put a steep angle on there. So I need to drill another hole in the frame, which we're going to need to go up to the bigger size drill bit, because we're just passing this screw through here. We're not actually biting the wood. Okay, so we're going to go right, of course, lined up with the other ones. It's going to be very weak. I'm going to walk slowly to get my bit started. Okay, so what I've done is I drilled at a bit of an angle, which is what I meant to do. Secondly, I'm going to take and stick this on here. And you see how weak of a connection we have without the magnet. So I'm going to take the magnet, I'm going to throw the magnet back onto this screwdriver so that we can hold this screw on the tip. This is a magnetic tip, by the way. It's just not strong enough to hold a bigger screw like that. Then I'm going to run this screw in to the bottom into the hole we just made. Okay, so you can see it's penetrating out the bottom of the wood. Okay, then I'm going to take and hold this right in this situation here. But I need a longer screwdriver now, one that I can, I think I can get at an angle. So I got my angle there. And the magnet's just kind of stuck to the side of this shaft so it allows the thing to spin still. And what we're doing is we're just going to bite that bottom hole with the screw now. Now I can take this screwdriver out and get a more appropriately length one, which in this case is going to be a lot longer, and I'm hoping we can line up with the screw. Let's test on one of the other ones. It's not going to work. It's too big. Dang it. I guess we're just going to have to grin and bear it with this one here. Or we'll go to this one, see if this one works. But you guys get the idea of what we're doing here. We're essentially getting this thing mounted But we're going to start and get one mounted, and then we're going to work the other two. And it's just getting real close now to where that's tight. You can see it's an obnoxious steep angle like this. Well, you're not going to like this step. This is kind of a scary one. This is where you actually break it into the wood. Because we're right up on the bottom. Right on the bottom there. I'm going to get a light so you guys can see. See, we're right on the bottom of that wood there. Because we're right on the bottom, you're not going to be able to get a screwdriver necessarily down to it real easy. So this way, we can kind of have the best of both worlds. So then those three wires that go to the motor, of course, we want to try to walk those down to where they belong. And then we're just going to see if we can get this thing approximately where we want. Remember, we need a pretty good amount of down angle on this for down thrust, and then right thrust. So at this point, I mean, honestly, that bottom is where it needs to be. I could take hot glue and shim that out for the last little bit. And then, in fact, I'm going to get the hot glue going, and we're going to do that here in a minute. One reason I use hot glue instead of CA on certain applications is just because it takes up space. It fills gaps better. Whereas other material like CA is going to be quite thin. It will fill gaps, but not near as much. Okay, so now our next step is we got to get some holes where these are going to then mate up. And this is going to be a little tricky because when we're done, we're going to have to rotate the motor out of the way. And keep it in mind, you got to leave yourself somewhere to actually get your screwdriver in there. So it looks like we got an angle here already, which is kind of handy. That's about the angle we're going to want that screw to go. So I'm going to pull some of this slack back up. And I'm just, a lot of this is just kind of like guesswork here, guys. Take a small screwdriver, and I'm not going to be able to make the angle. So you're just going to have to do guesswork on this. So hold this up there about where you want it. Remember, we don't need to really locate the holes any different. We just need to locate more washers. Okay, so I'm just taking this knife to make my mark. I'm going to just take this knife and make another mark here. Okay, so there's our two marks. Now I'm going to take these leads. I sort of probably should take them all the way out, but I'm going to try to, yeah, I'll probably just take them out to be on the safe side. Once they're out of the way, we can go ahead and drill those two holes, guys. Okay, so we're going to get this and we're going to drill it in and at a slight up angle. Man, this must be like the world's crappiest drill bit. It won't drill through balsa wood? Come on! How are you going to make it through steel? Okay, then over here. Oh, shoot, it walked on me a little bit. Trying to keep the motor leads away from the spinning drill bit. Yeah, baby. Okay. So now, you know how they say you don't want to know how they make sausage? Well, unless you're making sausage like this. And then you want to know. Alright, so my next step is to do like what we did earlier, which is take the screwdriver, take the magnet, stick one of these on here, and we're going to attempt to feed this through the new hole that we just generated. And it's probably going to be a bear to get these in. A bear cat, you know. Except that I was wrong again, guys. I love it when I'm wrong with problems like this. That means it's easier. Okay, now I'm tipping the motor back down. And I got to get these things started, but I need these leads to be in here. So I guess I'm just going to have to work those leads back into their pocket, one at a time, so they fit. And then, after that, we're going to take and press the motor up so that the screw engages the plastic housing, which we adapted to the motor mount. And we're going to spin vigorously. And it feels like it's hard to tell, but I think we might be getting some bites, some biting. Oh yeah, we're through it already. That is awesome, guys. I am really happy about this because I did not expect this to work very great. I expected it to ultimately work after much suffering and pain. Alright, now the last hole. Oh geez, this one's right up next to the frame stiffener. So I need to maybe take the forceps to get this started. So the way you can mount onto the forceps, you grab this tip just like this, clamp it on real tight. You don't want that to tip. Okay? Then you got to get in there. Hold on, let's see if I can hold the light. Okay, we're about to run out of memory. If we shut off, you'll get more layer. Yes, it's in. Okay. Okay, now we're just going to get this started. Alright guys, you get the idea. It'll look something like this. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Part 5 coming soon.